Let me ask you a question. If we were to proceed under harassment, why wouldn't harassment be applicable?
Because this is a person's fantasy of the mind, as he calls it. We've had videos where the President of the United States, George Bush, was assassinated as part of a movie with very detailed description of how you could kill a president. That was protected. This week, the Supreme Court of the United States voided a law which prohibited the distribution and manufacture of videos showing harm to animals, because they were apparently what they call crush videos, where they actually kill.
I know.
And the Supreme Court said that's protected by free speech, because it could also be interpreted to apply to other types of conduct. What my client did, my client is incendiary. I'm not arguing he's not a verbal flamethrower. But what he said and did is not terribly different from what the Congress heard when they had hearings on the issue of health care. They may not have liked the way they heard it. They may not have liked the passion that people expounded on it. But this is a political email. He's responding to a council person who said, this is what I think. And he goes overboard with his verbal hyperbole. I won't dispute.
Here's the flaw in that argument. The statute says, in pertinent part, a person may not follow another in or about a public place. Well, that wouldn't be applied.
Right.
Or, disjunctive, maliciously engage in a course of conduct that alarms another with the intent to harass, alarm, or annoy the other. Now, why isn't that applicable?
Because the free speech guarantees that we have, when someone says, I'd like to chop your head off, that in and of itself, that's not going to place anyone, if it's an email, in imminent bodily harm. If it,
we're not dealing with that right now. Why doesn't that paragraph fall clearly within the context of the harassment statute?
May I see the harassment statute?
Sure. Sure.
Well, to begin with, one of the decisions here says the harassment statute is not unconstitutionally vague, since a citizen is protected from unanticipated criminal liability due to the fact that one cannot be convicted for alarming or annoying another person unless one has been requested to stop the annoying conduct.
Okay. So
now, leaving that aside, what I'm saying is, in a democracy, there is a free speech right to express your opinions, and that means that people are going to go overboard. Nobody ever has to worry about their free speech right to say, gee, I think you're doing a great job. That's never going to be a problem. The problem is when they want to say, I think you ought to be replaced, I think you should be fired, I don't think you're doing a good job, I think you're a crook. I mean, by your definition, calling someone, saying repeatedly, I think that this person is a crook, would necessarily be subject to harassment, despite the fact that this person is a public official.
Well, I think if you use that analogy, that's fair comment might be erroneous.
Well,
as
I apologize.
That's okay. When I was in municipal government, people used to call the mayor all sorts of things.
Right.
I was never accused of being a crook, but there were a few people in Berlin Heights that didn't vote for me and would never vote for me. And I'm a big boy; I could take it, but I never got an email which suggested that my genitalia be carried around town in a jar.
And it's. With all due respect, I have heard expressions, and the court may have heard expressions dealing with the lack of an appropriate male genitalia in describing certain people and how they handle their lives and their activities. again, you know, this is, I'm not suggesting that this is not crude, coarse,
Annoying.
arguably inappropriate. However, the issue is, does it amount to harassment, which would be criminally prosecutable? And they filed a criminal charge, so this issue is going to get decided again.
Okay.
But the issue is, and it has to be by clear and convincing evidence, is it going to place him in imminent fear of bodily harm? In the case law, I'll leave that out.
I think you
Okay.
mix the issues.
Okay.
But because that's another discussion. We haven't even gotten to that point yet. And that's where Ms. Levan is going to want to bring into play the sordid history between these two people as to why, I assume, Mr. Deutsch is going to be able to testify, here's how I feel, here's how I felt when I got a copy of this, and here's why. On this date, on this date, on this date, your client did this, did this, did this. That's different from whether or not this paragraph in and of itself could be characterized as harassment under that statute.
I think that the issue of harassment, when someone is a public official, you're going to have to be...
He's not a public official.
Judge, if I might, the Supreme Court defined the term public official. It says the Supreme Court suggested the minimal parameters of the public official classification includes therein all persons among the hierarchy of government employees who have or appear to the public to have substantial responsibility or control over the conduct of governmental affairs. He's city manager.
He might be. I don't know.
He's the president of Bowie. In fact, the mayor is essentially chairman of the board. The county council is the board of directors. He's the day-to-day operational officer.
He's the manager. He's the city manager.
Day-to-day operational officer of the city.
Your Honor, we would concede he's a public official.
Okay.
However, I would object to the characterization of city government, which I don't think is a discussion for today, but anyway is inaccurate.
In any event, he's a public official. When you're a public official, you know, in our country, you're going to have to be, you know, you're going to have to understand that with that comes a certain amount of heat. People are going to criticize you, and the criticism you get may not always be couched in the Marquis de Queensberry rules. Sometimes the criticism is going to be malicious, sometimes it's going to be nasty, sometimes it's going to be unfair, sometimes it's going to be justified, sometimes it's going to be polite, and sometimes it may be profane. But that's what free speech is all about here.
Well, except the statute uses that modifier malicious right in its text.
But the statute can't overrule the Constitution. The Constitution makes it clear you have a free speech right, and this is political speech. He's a city manager.
Let me stop you right there. I don't see how this paragraph in any way advances the political discourse of the city of Bowie. You convince me of that, and then you may have something.
Well, if I may, Judge, just looking at it. He says, aside from the fact that he says he's speaking figuratively, and I think that also goes to the issue. I mean, he didn't say this is, I'm going to do this, or this should happen, or I would like to see somebody do this. This is all, I'm speaking figuratively here, okay? And again, having a neutered individual sometimes is figurative speech in terms of that. And leaving that aside.
Well, let me interrupt you, and let's not, we're all, with maybe the exception to me, pretty bright people here. One could easily make the argument that that qualifier is in there specifically so that he could go on to make these comments.
All right.
And to insulate him from the argument that it's not to be taken literally. And
Now,
if
all right, I understand,
and that is one very meaningful way to look at why that's in there.
But the
and
issue-
as the fact finder, I'm going to have to determine the reason that that language is in there.
Now,